50,000 people used to live here. Now it's a ghost town.
It would have been wrong of me to create an achievement series for games from the Xbox 360 era and not make a video on Call of Duty 4. The problem was that I'd already 100%ed this game, twice if you include the remastered version, but I just had to cover the first Modern Warfare, so I did what any rational person would. I made a new Xbox account and started again. The game doesn't actually have that many achievements, and most you get from completing the campaign on the hardest difficulty. So my plan was to go straight in on Veteran and finish the main story, maybe unlocking some random bits along the way. Then I would go back from the start on Recruit difficulty and mop up anything I missed, such as the miscellaneous achievements and the collectible intel. And then finally, the achievement that everybody thinks of when they think of this game, and maybe just one of the most iconic achievements full stop to be honest, Mile High Club, which requires you to complete the epilogue on Veteran. I thought it was only right to save that one until last. And also, apart from for finding all of the intel, I decided to avoid looking at any guides no matter how stuck I got. Back in 2007 I managed to do all of this, so I wanted to see if older me was still up to the challenge. Jumping straight in, there's the cargo ship mock-up during the tutorial, which has an achievement for completing it in under 20 seconds. I didn't want to sit and attempt to grind this out when I was super rusty though, so just moved on for now into the very nostalgic first mission. Now I remember playing the multiplayer variant of this map when I first got Xbox Live and just couldn't comprehend how I was playing against other people around the world, which is something that we obviously take massively for granted now. And escaping the sinking ship, I got my first Veteran mission specific achievement, and there's obviously a lot of these so I won't bother showing them all. Overall, the first half of the game wasn't too bad navigating on Veteran, apart from the odd section I'd find myself restarting over and over. This greenhouse part in Hunted for instance, although I think it was me trying to rush that was making it hard for myself. I also managed to pick up a few miscellaneous achievements along the way, which were saving an ally locked in the struggle on the stairs during the bog, killing an enemy whilst blinded by a flashbang, which I did during Hunted, killing 5 or more enemies with one shot from the AC-130, which you can only unlock whilst playing Death from Above, and an achievement for stabbing an enemy who has been downed, which I did during Shock and Awe. This led me on to one of the most famous missions in all of first-person shooting, and probably all of gaming to be honest, all Ghillied Up. Just mention Call of Duty 4 to somebody and they'll probably think of crawling through the grass with a sniper in hand. I know you can successfully navigate this level all guns blazing, but it just seems wrong to do it any way other than with a stealth approach, especially on Veteran. There's also an achievement for completing without alerting an enemy, so that's even more of a good reason to do it. I also want to give a notable mention to this absolutely classic moment of trying to stay hidden whilst the squad moves basically over the top of you. I don't know how, but it really managed to make me feel like nervous and on edge, and in the end I huddled against this tree and waited for them to pass. And shortly after that, I did have a bit of a scare when 2 soldiers seemingly saw me but didn't actually set off the alert, so I wasn't really sure if the achievement had been compromised, but decided to continue on anyway. A few more stealth sequences followed, but I reached the end of the level without any trouble and did unlock the Gillies in the Mist achievement for doing it all undetected. Now, when I think of the hardest parts of the Call of Duty 4 main campaign, I probably have 3 moments in particular that stick out in my mind, and this next level is the home to the first. After sniping Zakhaev, fighting or running through some pretty tough clusters of enemies, and carrying the injured Captain Macmillan through the second half of the level, I came to the standoff at the Ferris wheel. Now I remembered this bit being really tricky, but I'd always used this spot behind the bumper cars previously, so that's where I set up again. I got super lucky a couple of times. First when a group of soldiers rushed around the corner at me and somehow I managed to survive and kill them in a blind panic spray. And second of all, when the rescue chopper arrived and I had to carry Macmillan, so obviously wasn't able to shoot, I pretty much just ran and hoped at this point, and somehow I ended up completing this section first try. So maybe it wasn't as hard as I remembered, or maybe I just got very fortunate with this run. There was no time to celebrate though, because the very next mission, Heat, had the second horrible section to navigate. Again, it involved a rescue chopper, but this time it didn't come to me. I had to run down the village to the landing zone within the time limit. I would love to be able to go into more detail about my strategy for this, but mostly it was just a lot of running and hoping. There were a few bits I did that are worth mentioning though, such as sticking to the far right hand side for crossing the fields, and making use of my smoke grenades to help provide cover. Then once in the village, I cut back across to the left because that side seemed to have less enemies to navigate. Eventually, after getting mildly stuck at a pretty brutal checkpoint right out in the open, I managed to make it down the hill and by hopping over this fence here, reached the landing zone. Overall, this section took me about 25 minutes or so to complete, which isn't too bad, but when you're just running the same minute or two over and over, it does get a little tedious. But at the same time, I guess it was just preparing me well for what was to come later. Over the next few missions, I grabbed another couple of miscellaneous achievements, which were for surviving a dog attack and then killing 4 enemies in a row with headshots. Next up was the mission No Fighting in the War Room, and this is the last real hurdle for beating the main story on Veteran. Well, one section in particular. There's a T-junction of tunnels that leads onto more tunnels filled with enemies, and I found myself getting stuck between pushing to make sure I had enough time left to complete the objective, whilst also not just running face first into instant death. I did manage to find the right balance though after many failed attempts and lots of prone crawling around corners. So I made it to the door to the launch control room, and from this point it was smooth sailing with no more restarts needed. Only 15 minutes later or so, I found myself at the campaign's finale, and surviving the heroic final stand at the bridge unlocked the game's biggest achievement. 90 gamer score for completing the campaign on either Hardened or Veteran, but realistically, who is doing this on Hardened? And just as a side note, this entire run took me around 6.5 hours to do, with No Fighting in the War Room being my longest mission at 40 minutes. And after finishing the campaign on Veteran, I had 28 of the 37 achievements and 850 of the 1000 gamer score unlocked. So I went back in to start mopping up. I went through the missions once more in chronological order to get the miscellaneous achievements that I'd missed, and this time with a guide for finding all of the hidden intel. First up was the cargo ship mock-up, and now that I was nice and warmed up, I actually ended up getting this on my first try. It was still a pretty clunky run, and I know in the remastered version there's an achievement for beating the Infinity Ward best time, which is a lot trickier, but for this video, I don't have to care about that. And whilst grabbing the intel on the first mission, I also picked up the achievement for stabbing 3 enemies in a row. Then after that, I unlocked achievements on the mission Charlie Don't Surf, first for taking out 2 enemies by blowing up a car, and then destroying all of the TVs showing Al-Assad's speech. I didn't actually use a guide for this one, I just put blind faith in myself being able to find them all. Maybe a stupid thing to do, but it worked out alright this time. Not long after those achievements came another for finding half of the intel, and then on the following mission, the Man of the People achievement for saving the farmer. I could remember this being a thing, but you have to wait for Captain Price to give you the order or you won't unlock it. So on my Veteran run, I made that mistake by going too early. And during the War Pig mission, I unlocked Bird on the Ground for shooting down a helicopter with an RPG. And after another couple of hours going through grabbing intel, I collected the 30th and final one. And with that, the Eyes and Ears achievement. Now I just had one achievement left for Call of Duty 4. The achievement. Mile High Club honestly needs no introduction at this point, but I'm going to give it one anyway for those who have managed to make it this far in life without knowing about it. It's the epilogue mission and must be completed on Veteran for the achievement. Like No Fighting in the War Room, you're on a time limit, but instead of the 9 minutes that gives you, Mile High Club gives you just the 1 minute. And you have to fight your way through 2 levels of a passenger plane, and many enemies. You can pause briefly to reload at points, but realistically you've got to be nearly constantly pushing forward or you just won't have enough time. And if you do make it up the stairs and to the other side, you have to rescue a hostage in a lovely high pressure situation, knowing that failure puts you back at the beginning because there are 0 checkpoints. I was actually pretty amazed I had so much muscle memory for this from grinding out previously. First in 2007 and then when I did the remastered 5 or so years ago. Obviously, it was rough at the beginning, but I could remember where I should be flashbanging and taking cover, and I felt that I was making quick progress. Don't get me wrong, I still died plenty of times before even making out of the first room, but overall I could sense I was improving, and within the first hour of attempts I started making it close to the end, but each time I just didn't have quite enough time to deal with the final room properly, leading me to some failures where I just blindly ran in knowing my chance of success was basically 0, and also a very painful one where I thought I had it, but got stuck on someone who was down, which ended up with the plane blowing up in my face with the final door in sight. But I kept grinding away, and only 15 minutes later I had a run that didn't actually start great with some dodgy shooting, but I managed to push through quickly, surviving some near misses and even had my team back me up when I needed. Then this final room, I flashbanged pretty much all of the enemies, which isn't always easy to do because there is a guy hidden away in the back left corner, and he will often ruin your run. And after knifing the last person in my way, I reached the hostage situation. Now, when I first did this in 2007, I remember reaching this point after hours and hours of trying, and then shooting the guy in the leg, which, whilst working on other difficulties, doesn't on veteran, and instead you fail with a message telling you that veterans only aim for the head. That moment will most likely haunt me for the rest of my days, so I guess the positive is that I knew not to make that mistake again. This time I waited patiently for the moment to strike and took him out, ending this struggle, and after jumping out the plane saw the game's most iconic achievement pop. All in all, Call of Duty 4 took me just over 10 hours to 100% from scratch, and I did it in 3 or 4 sittings over the course of a few days, so rather productive. Or not, depends how you want to look at it, I guess. But anyway, that's the end of this video, so I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if you have any fond memories of this game or there are others that you'd like to see a video about, and I'll see you in the next one.